November 12, 1944. Hürtgen Forest, Germany. The forest floor trembled. Friedrich Weber pressed his back against frozen earth as American artillery tore through the canopy above, transforming ancient oaks into splinters and smoke. His hands, surgeon's hands, steady through 1,000 operations, shook as they clutched his medical bag. Inside, 3 morphine syrettes, a roll of gauze already brown with someone else's blood, and a scalpel he'd sharpened on a rock that morning. No sulfa powder, no plasma, no hope. 50 meters away, through the skeletal trees, he could see them coming. American infantry, moving with mechanical precision through terrain that had swallowed 2 German divisions whole. Weber had been taught they were soft, cowboys and factory workers playing soldier, men who would crumble when faced with true Prussian discipline. He believed none of that now. The artillery stopped. In the ringing silence, Weber heard something that made his chest tighten. The screaming of wounded men. German voices calling for medics who couldn't come, who had nothing to give them, even if they could. Weber had been a surgeon once. Before the war, before the Eastern Front, before Hürtgen. He'd saved lives in a Munich hospital where the lights always worked and the autoclave always steamed, and nurses brought clean instruments on gleaming trays. That world felt as distant as childhood. Now he was a butcher. The American grenade that ended Weber's war didn't announce itself with drama. One moment he was crawling toward a wounded corporal, the next he was lying on his back, staring at gray November sky, wondering why his leg felt wet and warm. He tried to sit up. The pain arrived then, white hot in total, and he understood. Shrapnel had torn through his left thigh, severing something important. Femoral artery, probably. He had maybe 10 minutes before exsanguination. His training took over. He fumbled for his belt, trying to fashion a tourniquet, but his fingers wouldn't cooperate. The world tilted, dimmed. He thought of his wife, Anna, and their daughter, Greta, who'd been 8 years old when he last saw her. Wondered if they were still alive in the ruins of Munich. Then hands grabbed him. American hands. Rough, efficient, speaking a language he barely understood. "Easy, Fritz. We got you." Weber tried to protest. He was the enemy. They should leave him. But one soldier, a boy, really couldn't have been more than 19, was already applying a tourniquet with practiced speed while another jabbed something into his arm. Morphine, American morphine, administered without hesitation to a German prisoner who moments ago had been shooting at them. The pain receded into warm fog. "Jesus, look at all this blood. Medic, we need a litter here." Weber wanted to explain that he was a medic, a surgeon, that he understood his wound was mortal, that they shouldn't waste resources on him, but his tongue felt thick, and the morphine pulled him down into darkness, where rank and nationality and ideology dissolved into nothing. He woke to brightness. For a confused moment, Weber thought he'd died and this was some peculiar afterlife. Then his eyes focused and he realized. Electric lights, dozens of them, harsh, surgical, impossible lights illuminating a tent, filled with the organized chaos of a functioning field hospital. He was on a proper operating table, not a barn door balanced on crates, not the back of a truck, an actual table with stirrups and clamps and, he couldn't believe it, an overhead light on an adjustable arm. "Welcome back, Captain." An American officer stood beside him, studying an X-ray film. The man wore captain's bars and the caduceus insignia of the medical corps. His uniform was clean. His face was rested. He looked like someone who'd slept in a bed and eaten breakfast that morning. "I'm Captain Morrison. You're in the 3rd Armored Division clearing station. You're English. Do you understand me?" "Yes." Weber's voice came out hoarse. I studied in Edinburgh. Before. Edinburgh, good school." Morrison hung the X-ray on a light box, an actual light box, powered by a generator Weber could hear humming somewhere outside. "You're lucky. The shrapnel missed your femoral artery by maybe 2 millimeters. Nicked the superficial femoral vein pretty good, though. Lost about 30% of your blood volume." Weber tried to process this. They'd X-rayed him. They'd assessed his injuries with precision imaging. "We're going to operate," Morrison continued, matter of fact. "Get that shrapnel out, repair the vein, debride the wound. You'll be in surgery in about 15 minutes. 15 minutes? Weber's German accent thickened with confusion. But the line, "There must be many wounded." Morrison smiled, and it wasn't unkind. "You think we make prisoners wait? Son, this isn't the Wehrmacht. Every man who comes through that tent flap gets triaged based on medical need, not nationality. Your wound is urgent, so you go now." He paused. "Besides, we need good surgeons. Your men told us you're the real deal. Figure we'll patch you up, and maybe you can help us patch up some of your guys." Weber stared at him. This wasn't possible. This violated everything he'd been taught about American inefficiency, their sentimental weakness, their inability to make hard decisions. You saved your own first. You triaged based on military value. You certainly didn't waste precious surgical time on enemy wounded who might die anyway. "I don't understand," Weber whispered. Morrison was already moving away, calling orders to his team. "You will," he said. "Now count backwards from 10. The sodium pentothal works fast." Weber woke in a recovery tent that smelled of canvas and iodine and something else, something he couldn't immediately place. Then he recognized it. Coffee. Real coffee. A nurse, an American woman with lieutenant's bars and tired eyes, was checking his pulse. "Welcome back, Captain Weber. How's your pain level? 1 to 10. 4, maybe 5. He spoke carefully, testing his English. "Where?" "You're in post-op. Surgery went well. Captain Morrison got the shrapnel out clean, repaired the vein, cleaned up the tissue. You got 4 units of plasma and a shot of penicillin." She said this casually, the way you'd mentioned the weather. Penicillin? Weber felt something crack in his chest. Not pain, something deeper. 4 units of plasma, penicillin, surgical repair of a vein in a prisoner of war. He'd amputated 17 legs in the past month alone. 17 young men condemned to crippled futures because German field medicine had neither the drugs nor the time nor the philosophy to do better. He'd watched gangrene spread through wounds that would have been survivable with antibiotics. He'd held the hands of boys who died from infections that penicillin would have stopped in a day. "You gave me penicillin," he said quietly. The nurse looked at him with something like pity. "Yes, standard post-operative protocol. We give it to everyone." She patted his shoulder. "Try to rest. You'll be moved to a POW hospital within 48 hours once you're stable." She left. Weber lay in the semi-darkness, listening to the sounds of the field hospital around him. Generators humming, voices calling measurements and requests, the whisper of oxygen tanks, the beep of something electronic. Monitoring equipment, perhaps, though he couldn't imagine what. No screaming. That's what struck him most profoundly. In German field hospitals, there was always screaming. Men waiting for surgery without adequate pain relief. Men dying slowly from wounds that couldn't be addressed. Men conscious during procedures because morphine had run out weeks ago. Here there was only the efficient quiet of organized medical care. The factory of life running at full capacity. Morrison came for him the next morning. "How's the leg?" "Better. Much better." Weber struggled to sit up. "Captain Morrison, I need to understand. The plasma, the penicillin, for a prisoner?" Morrison pulled up a camp chair, settled into it with the ease of a man who'd learned to rest whenever possible. "You really don't get it, do you? We're not like you, Weber. We don't see soldiers as expendable units. Every man who comes through here, German, American, doesn't matter, gets the same standard of care, because that's what civilization looks like." Weber shook his head. "But the resources, the cost, it's not efficient to save lives?" Morrison's voice hardened slightly. "See, that's where you people got it wrong. You think medicine is about triage, about choosing who's worthy of saving. We think medicine is about capacity. You build enough capacity, you don't have to choose." He stood, walked to the tent entrance, gestured outside. "Come on, you're ambulatory. Time you saw what a real medical system looks like." Weber hobbled on crutches through the American medical complex, and what he saw rewrote his understanding of modern warfare. 4 massive tents formed the core of the clearing station, each one organized with assembly line precision. Wounded arrived at receiving, where medics perform rapid triage, not deciding who would live or die, but determining what treatment each man needed and in what order. Those needing immediate surgery went straight to operating rooms equipped with everything Weber had only dreamed of. Electric lights, sterilization equipment, full anesthesia kits, surgical instruments that gleamed like jewelry. The truly shocking part, they had capacity to spare. Morrison walked him through the supply tent, and Weber thought he might weep. Stacks of plasma bottles, cases of penicillin, morphine syrettes by the hundreds, sulfa powder, bandages, surgical silk. Whole blood for transfusions, kept cold in ice-packed containers, everything labeled, inventoried, organized. We get resupply every 48 hours, Morrison explained, sometimes faster if we need it. We radioed yesterday that we were running low on type O blood. There's a shipment coming in this afternoon from a base hospital in France. Whole blood, fresh plasma, more penicillin, whatever we need. But how? Weber heard the desperation in his own voice. The logistics alone. We couldn't. Germany couldn't. Germany chose not to. Morrison's tone was flat. You put everything into tanks and aircraft and rockets. We put it into trucks and ships and logistics. You wanted wonder weapons. We wanted our boys to come home alive. They stopped at a post-operative ward where American and German wounded lay in adjacent cots. A young private from Wisconsin with a chest wound dozed next to a Wehrmacht corporal with a shattered arm. Both had IV lines running. Both had been given pain medication. Both were monitored by the same medical staff. Weber watched a German soldier, barely 20 from his appearance, receive a shot of penicillin from an American medic. The boy didn't even wake up. Just slept peacefully while medicine that Germany couldn't produce in sufficient quantities flowed into his veins, stopping the infection that would have killed him a week ago. In our hospital, Weber said slowly, that boy would have lost his arm, probably his life. We had no choice. You had a choice, Morrison corrected. Your government chose ideology over science, conquest over medicine. You chose to see human life as currency to be spent rather than value to be preserved. He paused. Every German doctor I've talked to says the same thing. We had no choice, but you did. At every level, Germany chose this. Over the following weeks, as Weber's leg healed and he began working in the American hospital, assisting in surgeries, treating German prisoners, learning techniques he'd never imagined, he witnessed the systematic difference between two philosophies of war. The Americans had invented a completely new approach to battlefield medicine. They called it the chain of evacuation. Wounded soldiers were moved through a series of increasingly sophisticated medical facilities, each one designed to provide exactly the level of care needed. Battalion aid stations for immediate stabilization, collecting companies for advanced first aid, clearing stations like this one for surgery, evacuation hospitals for recovery, general hospitals in the rear for long-term care. At each stage, detailed medical records traveled with the patient. X-rays, lab results, surgical notes, everything documented, everything tracked. Weber had worked in hospitals where they ran out of paper for records. Here, every wounded man had a medical file that would follow him through his entire treatment. The difference showed in survival rates. American soldiers wounded in Hürtgen had a 97% survival rate if they reached the clearing station alive. 97%. Weber's own division had lost 60% of its wounded simply because they couldn't get them to medical care in time, couldn't treat their infections, couldn't stop shock from killing them before their wounds did. One night, working late in the surgical tent, Weber assisted Morrison in repairing a complex shoulder wound on a young German lieutenant. The damage was extensive. Shrapnel had shattered the clavicle and torn through the brachial plexus. In a German field hospital, this would have been an amputation. Here, Morrison spent 4 hours meticulously repairing nerve damage, reconstructing bone, ensuring the boy would keep his arm. Why? Weber asked as they closed. Why this much effort for one German soldier? The time alone? Morrison didn't look up from his suturing. Because he's 23 years old and he should get to use his arm for the next 50 years. Because medicine isn't about nationality, it's about humanity. And because we can, he tied off the last stitch. That's the real difference, Weber. Not that we're softer, that we have the capacity to care. Your side chose not to build that capacity. Don't confuse our efficiency with weakness. Weber had no answer. He thought of the 17 amputations, The boys who would never walk again because Germany had decided penicillin production was less important than synthetic rubber for tank treads. The thousands who had died from preventable infections because the Reich's leadership believed sacrifice was more valuable than salvation. America hadn't defeated Germany with superior warriors. They defeated them with superior logistics, superior organization, and a fundamental belief that every individual life was worth preserving. They'd turned medical care into mass production, not of death but of survival. It was the most devastating blow Weber had experienced in the entire war. Spring 1945, a POW camp in Belgium. The war in Europe ended on the 8th of May. Weber heard the news in a compound filled with German medical personnel, doctors, surgeons, medics, all of whom had been captured and put to work in American hospitals. They'd saved hundreds of lives, German and American alike. Now they waited to learn their fate. Captain Morrison came to see him that afternoon. "Weber, walk with me." They moved through the camp in silence until they reached the fence overlooking a valley. In the distance, Weber could see trucks moving supplies, planes landing, the massive machinery of military logistics winding down from war to peace. "We're setting up programs," Morrison said, "helping rebuild medical systems in occupied Germany. We need people who understand both sides, who've seen what modern medicine can do, who can teach the next generation of German doctors that there's another way." Weber didn't speak for a long moment. "You want me to help rebuild German medicine, using American methods, using humane methods, evidence-based methods, methods that value human life over ideology." Morrison turned to face him. "You're a good surgeon, Weber. You were working with one hand tied behind your back. Time to see what you can do with both hands free and a full kit." "I don't know if they'll listen," Weber said quietly. "My countrymen, they're proud." "Then make them understand what pride costs them." Morrison's voice was firm. "Show them the numbers, 97% survival rate versus 60% mortality. Show them what penicillin can do. Show them what happens when you value life." He paused. "You thought we were soft. That's what you all thought. But we weren't soft. We were smart. We were organized. And we gave a damn whether our people lived or died." Weber thought of the factory of life, the endless supplies, the plasma bottles and penicillin vials and morphine syringes. The young nurse checking his pulse with professional competence. The German boy sleeping peacefully while American medicine saved his arm. The systematic industrial-scale commitment to human survival. "We chose wrong," he said finally, "at every level, every decision. We chose death over life." "Yes," Morrison agreed, "now choose differently." October 1961, University of Munich. Professor Friedrich Weber stood before a lecture hall filled with medical students. Young Germans who'd been children during the war, who'd grown up in the ruins and now wanted to rebuild. His legs still ached sometimes, a reminder of a November day in Hürtgen, when his entire understanding of medicine and war and civilization had been shattered like his thigh bone. "Medicine is not neutral," he told them, his voice carrying through the amphitheater. "It is not simply about technique or knowledge. It is about philosophy, about what you believe human life is worth." He showed them photographs, American field hospitals, supply chains, survival statistics, the systematic approach that had saved thousands of lives while German medicine had failed its own soldiers. "In November 1944, I was wounded and captured. I was certain I would die. The Americans had other plans." He smiled slightly. "They x-rayed me. They operated on me immediately. They gave me plasma, penicillin, morphine. They treated me exactly as they treated their own wounded. And when I asked why, they looked at me like I was insane. Because to them, the question itself was insane." A student raised her hand. "Professor, was it because Americans are more moral, more civilized?" "No," Weber said firmly. "It was because they made different choices. They chose to build medical capacity rather than more tanks. They chose logistics over glory. They chose to measure success by survival rates rather than territory gained. They chose to see soldiers as human beings worth saving rather than expendable resources." He paused, letting that sink in. "Germany lost the war on many fronts, but we lost it in the hospitals too. We lost it every time a young man died from a preventable infection. Every time we amputated because we had no alternative. Every time we chose ideology over evidence, sacrifice over science, death over life. He looked at the young faces before him, the future of German medicine. You have a choice now. Every day and every decision you make as physicians, you choose between humanity and barbarism, between care and cruelty, between life and death. He thought of Morrison, of the factory of life, of the systematic compassion that had seemed impossible until he'd witnessed it. Choose wisely, choose life. The lecture hall was silent. Then slowly, one student began to clap. Then another. Then the entire room was standing, applauding not for Weber, but for the lesson he'd learned in Blood and Pain and Revelation. That civilization was measured not by the monuments it built or the battles it won, but by how fiercely it fought to preserve each individual human life. That evening, Weber returned to his office and looked at the photograph on his desk. Captain Morrison and himself, taken at the POW camp in Belgium, spring 1945. Two surgeons from opposite sides, united by the only war that mattered, the one against death itself. On the back, in Morrison's handwriting, were words Weber had never forgotten. Not soft, just human. There's a difference. Weber understood that now. He would spend the rest of his life teaching others to understand it too. Some lessons could only be learned in the ruins of everything you thought you knew. Some transformations required complete destruction before reconstruction could begin. He had been destroyed in Hürtgen Forest. He had been rebuilt in an American field hospital. And now he was teaching others to build something better than what had been lost. Medicine was a choice between humanity and barbarism, between life and death. Weber had finally learned to choose correctly.